Well, welcome to you all. I'm so glad you have responded to this invitation, and I'm very grateful to the Institute for Advanced Studies to give me the opportunity to share some of my ideas with you. I've been working on this for some time, and I really got interested in this topic through my friends in the United States. But then I worked more on this last year, and I gave a lecture in London at the end of last year. And then during the beginning of 2015, it suddenly occurred to me, well, Bristol is the green capital of Europe, which is a very important distinction and really great for Bristol. And so much is happening in so many different ways that I thought, well, the greening of religions is actually a topic that is quite appropriate and very topical and should be raised because it is really much involved, and our religious attitudes or our religious traditions have much to do, or they relate in many ways to some of the environmental issues. So I want to share my ideas with you today, and I will try and give you a little overview. I mean, it's in a way quite a general introductory lecture, but I want to clarify some key ideas, mention the bad and the good news about our planet as perceived by some leading environmentalists, and then I will discuss religion and ecology and finish with some reflections on ecological spirituality. As you all will be aware, most of the world religions developed long before there existed an environmental crisis on a global scale. And if one takes a comparative cultural approach or looks at religions in a comparative perspective, it's quite clear that the different world faiths contain many profound insights that can help to shape our attitudes to the earth and to the whole planet and all its peoples. To give you some examples, I could, for example, cite a lot of scriptural passages from different faiths as proof texts to illustrate beliefs in nature or the divine or the spirit. I could look at particular faith practices in order to ask, are these environmentally friendly or are they ecologically harmful? I mean, these are all things one could do under the theme of religion and ecology. But I won't do this in detail because it would really require more than one lecture. So let me start, first of all, with clarifying some major key ideas. There's much talk about sustainability today, but what does it actually refer to? To sustain, one of the definitions is, to sustain means to support, nourish, maintain, and defend something, so that sustainable can be understood as being able to be maintained at a certain rate or level. Now, since the 1980s, this term sustainability has been especially used in the sense of human sustainability on planet Earth. It came to be related particularly to sustainable development, as in the often quoted Brundtland Commission that defined sustainability in the United Nations in 1987 as follows. I quote, "Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present," this is very important, "without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs." So it's relating the present to the future. And implicit in this statement is the recognition that the human species bears a decisive responsibility for the future of the earth and its peoples. If sustainability can be achieved, the earth will be able to continue supporting human life. Now, 4 interconnected domains come into play here: ecology, economics, politics, and culture. The domain of culture encompasses all of human knowledge and action, but it is also inseparably linked to the realm of values, ethics, religions, and spirituality, with which I'm particularly concerned here. Moving towards sustainability is an immense social challenge. It entails radical changes in current law, urban planning, transport, sustainable agriculture, the use of science and technology, and the adjustment of individual and social lifestyles. Other terms besides sustainability, other terms in need of clarification are the terms nature, environment, and ecology. Much of the modern environmental movement found its original impetus in re-examining historical and contemporary experiences of how human beings relate to nature, both in the past and in the present, and how they understand themselves as part of nature, how they see themselves as what we call now to be part of the whole web of life. And that understanding has much deepened because of our modern scientific discoveries and much deeper knowledge of evolutionary becoming. Now, since the dawn of time, one might almost say, religions have viewed nature as revelatory, as source of revelation, a context for human beings where the experience of nature is often linked to a creative force, to the source and fountain of all life, and to a numinous or divine presence. Now, the word ecology came first into use in the late 1860s, so it's over 100 years old, over 150 years, derived from the Greek word oikos, which means house or home. It was used in biology to describe the interactions between organisms and the environment, whereas sociologists refer to human ecology as concerned with the study of spacing and interdependence of people in institutions. A further step was the later development of environmentalism, which is defined as, I quote, advocacy of the protection of air, water, and other natural resources from pollution or its effects. Now today, the term ecology is widely used in preference to that of environment. Ecology locates human beings within the horizon of emergent, interdependent life, rather than seeing humanity as the vanguard of evolution. Because the word environment can wrongly suggest that nature is something apart from humans, whereas ecology indicates more clearly the dynamic interaction of humans with nature. While drawing on the scientific understanding of the existing interrelationships with nature, the expression religious ecology, which has come into use also more recently, points towards a cultural awareness of the human kinship with and dependence on nature for the continuity of all life. Influenced by the teachings of Spinoza, Gandhi, and the Buddha, the Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss, who lived from 1912 to 2009, developed the idea of deep ecology. By deep, he meant asking deeper questions in contrast to what he called shallow ecology. Ecology that is so shallow that it thinks the big ecological problems can be resolved within an industrial capitalist society by fighting pollution and resource depletion in order to preserve human health and affluence, in order to go really on as we always have done. Now, in contrast to the shallow ecological movement, the so-called deeper ecological movement operates out of a deep respect for all forms of life and accords them an equal right to live and blossom. Deep ecology is both an orientation within environmental ethics and a spiritually based rethinking of human identity. This requires reflecting on the purpose of the human species and its future, including the responsibility for humanity's own future development. Some of these ideas are much discussed in the works of the well-known American ecologist Thomas Berry, who lived between 1914 and 2009 also, and who is considered by some as the leading teacher of deep ecology. And his works are very widely read, perhaps less so in Britain than in the United States. Now, Thomas Berry distinguishes the environmental movement from the ecology movement in the sense that he understands the environmental movement as an adjustment of the Earth community to our human needs, whereas the ecology movement is the other way around, is seen as an adjustment of human beings to the needs of the Earth community. So this is the larger, more challenging paradigm shift based on the acknowledgement, as Thomas Berry always says, that we belong to the Earth, whereas the Earth does not belong to us, right? We belong to the larger Earth community. Now, in the past, religions were often thought to be primarily concerned with divine human relations that seek personal salvation and liberation from all earthly concerns. In contrast to this, the newly developed academic field of ecology and religions explores the broad interaction of humans as individuals and communities with the natural world and the universe at large. To gain a deeper understanding of the interrelationships between humans, the earth, the cosmos, and the sacred involves exploring such topics as the creative and destructive dynamics of nature, the divine presence and purpose in nature, and what sacred texts in different religious traditions teach us about nature, as well as the symbolic expression of nature in myths and rituals. This also includes the understanding of ecology displayed in traditional practices of agriculture, commerce, fishing and hunting, and many other perspectives that deepen our understanding of the interrelationship between humans, earth, cosmos, and the sacred. So we must recognize the challenge of historical complexities which are presented by our global religious heritage. Religions have been an important vehicle in helping humans to follow particular beliefs and specific practices in order to effect self-transformation and achieve community cohesion within a cosmological context. When surveying our rich religious resources around the globe, it cannot be presumed that environmentally friendly scriptural passages must always imply environmentally sensitive practices. The teaching, the writings, the scriptures are often quite different from what people actually do. So while there always exists an inevitable gap between ideas and practices, the world faiths nonetheless possess a rich deposit of spiritual and practical resources that can fruitfully contribute important ideas to many contemporary discussions of environmental policies and ethics. An insight into these resources can be gained from the long entry on ecology and religion in the 2005 edition of the Magisterial Encyclopedia of Religion, which we have in the library, and the equally informative handbooks edited by the American environmental philosopher Roger Gottlieb. Especially, he has edited the Oxford Handbook of Religion and Ecology, which was published in 2006 and which is a splendid handbook with lots of materials in it. Now, after having explained some of the ideas that are connected with religion and ecology, I come to my second section on the bad and good news about our planet. That is actually a quotation from Roger Gottlieb. What is the bad and the good news about our planet? Let's first look at the environmental crisis, the bad news, which in another book by Gottlieb, which is called This Sacred Earth, which is very often quoted, he lists 8 features of this environmental crisis, which has now become a global event. It's not just here and there, it covers the entire globe and it affects the entire human community wherever we live. First, the global climate and atmospheric changes threaten us with an unprecedentedly fast global warming, which will alter the living conditions for the entire planet and lead to what has been called, and this is really very threatening, the end of nature. If we don't change our ways, it will be the end of nature. That is the forecast. Secondly, the toxic waste, whether chemical, heavy metal, biological, nuclear waste, have accumulated in staggering quantities and are found in every region, no matter how remote, and these result in environmentally caused diseases, and most obviously, it is said, the dramatic increase in cancer. Third, the loss of land from overuse of chemical agriculture and destruction of forests threatens food production and leads to erosion and desertification. Fourth, the loss of species, or what some call the crisis of biodiversity, with decimation of a variety of habitats. Current rates of extinction are reducing the number of species to the lowest since the end of the age of dinosaurs 65 million years ago. So that is also a great threat, the loss of species. Then another loss is the loss of wilderness. Ecosystems that remain free to develop without human interference or intrusion have become increasingly rare. People are everywhere on the globe, yet we are haunted by the loss of that natural other which has been human beings' long-time companion for biological ages. To find the wilderness, you find this in the poets, in the romantics. I mean, you can find a lot about this in literature. Then the devastation of indigenous peoples, who are the last examples of human community integrated into non-human nature. That's another aspect of our loss. Seventh point, human patterns and quantities of consumptions are unsustainable. The developed world's insatiable consumerism depletes natural resources and contributes to global warming and accumulation of waste. In the underdeveloped world, an overpopulation relative to existing technological resources decimates the landscape. Moreover, a widespread culture of meat eating undermines the ecosystem's integrity through overutilization of water, grazing land, chemicalized pesticides, and food additives. And the last point concerns genetic engineering, which seems to promise miracle cures, but also menaces us with the potentially catastrophic invention of insufficiently tested organisms. Genetic engineering has come into existence before we have given adequate consideration to what this magnitude of human control over evolution could possibly mean. So these are the points put forward by some environmentalists like Roger Gottlieb. Now to the good or better news and to the more hopeful prospects relating to the rise, what is called the rise of a new Earth consciousness, which opens up new possibilities for the future versus the loss of harmony and balance in human-Earth relations. Many people consider the ecological and environmental movement simply as secular and activist, simply concerned with counteracting environmental change and devoted to the preservation of biodiversity of life. But the ecological revolution, because it is certainly a revolution, it represents a profound paradigm shift that includes ultimately a spiritual dimension, so that ecological activism can be seen as having a spiritual basis and orientation. The defining icon of the new Earth consciousness is the amazing photograph that you probably will all know, called Earthrise. The first image of the Earth taken from space by Apollo 8 in December 1968, the famous image of our bluish-green planet floating suspended in space, surrounded by blackness. Few sights in human history have been as exhilarating as that first Earthrise over the lunar horizon. Human beings saw for the first time the Earth as a sphere, as a globe in space, and this new view of the Earth was an unforeseen revelation. This image of great simplicity and beauty can be seen as a symbolic expression of our evolution toward oneness and global awareness, an image of hope of our evolution toward oneness and, an image of hope and inspiration, although it conceals or hides, if you like, the great ethnic, religious, and cultural diversities among humans and the splendid varieties of the species on our planet. Now, we are all still living on the same Earth as our forebears have done for centuries, if not to say millennia. Yet our awareness in the 20th and 21st century, our awareness in relationship to the Earth have changed profoundly. A new Earth consciousness has emerged and is growing. Our contemporary experience of nature, what we now call the biosphere, a word that was first coined in 1875 by the Austrian biologist Seuss, Edward Seuss, who spoke about the face of the earth. The earth has got physiognomy. You see, before that, scientists did not look at the earth as a whole. They looked at particularities, but not as the earth as one. So the awareness and relationship of humans to the earth have changed profoundly. A new earth consciousness has emerged and is growing. And the biosphere is now very much the experience of one planet, of the living world as a great vulnerable habitat which is threatened by many disasters and much exploitative human behavior. In Thomas Berry's view, we have been autistic for centuries in relation to the earth. Berry considers a truly ecological attitude as radically different from the currently dominant industrial attitude to the natural world. He writes that we need to cease our industrial assault on planet Earth, befriend the Earth, and renew our human participation in the grand liturgy of the universe, as he puts it. Like other ecologists, Berry stresses the need for a radical turnaround from the dominant paradigm of anthropocentrism to an inclusive biocentrism, centering on life, that takes into account the needs of all life forms, not only the need and greed of human beings. Our new consciousness requires what Berry calls, and some others also call, a new story. And Berry hauntingly speaks of the dream of the earth, whereas James Lovelock refers to the oneness we seek as the vision of Gaia, which calls for a new look at life on earth. That is how James Lovelock subtitled his famous book on Gaia. Already in 1972, the then Indian Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, asked at a UN conference on the environment the following question, which I find very intriguing. Will the growing awareness of one Earth and one environment guide us to the concept of one humanity? Will there be more equitable sharing of environmental costs and greater interest in the accelerated progress of the less developed world? This is a question one can still ask with even greater emphasis. One could also say that this question points already in the direction of the subsequently formulated Earth Charter, which was promulgated in 2000 after worldwide consultation, and includes the collaboration of many religious groups and organizations. I think this charter, which I sometimes lecture exclusively on, is an amazing charter and has certainly very strong spiritual dimension, but it took 10 years to formulate, and the consultations were so wide-ranging among political groups, different nations, different religious groups, and so on. It's an extraordinary story. Now, our human species is deeply embedded within the biosphere, which provides us with a biological vision of oneness, often referred to as the web of life, as I already mentioned earlier. So that's the biological vision of oneness, one humanity, one human species. There are not more than one human species, there's no more. But human history, philosophy, and religion also know of the dream of a cultural and social oneness of humanity, not just the biological oneness. This very ancient theme is found in countless creation stories and myths, and it is now becoming a real possibility for the human future. This vision of a common belonging, of a shared origin and destiny, is deeply enshrined in the teachings of different world faiths. Today we speak of a wider ecumenism as encompassing diverse groups and attitudes to forge greater unity beyond our differences. Numerous religious teachings speak about the inclusiveness of creation and salvation for all human beings. Such visions are all-embracing and universal in their intentionality. Like a lot of religious teaching, they are universal in theory, but little of this intended all-embracing universality has ever been put fully into practice, or where applied, it has been practiced among separate, mutually exclusive groups. The universality just extends to one particular group, one particular segment of humanity, one particular nation or race or whatever, but not to the whole of humankind. Yet today, the awareness is growing around the globe that the new consciousness of one Earth awakens us to the need for one human community. At the same time, the general awareness of the religious visions of human unity is perhaps less strong today than the concrete experience of the diversity of faith, which is far more baffling and easier to see than the possibility of oneness. The unprecedented ethnic, social, cultural, and religious pluralism of the contemporary world certainly presents tremendous challenges, but it also provides great opportunities for mutual learning, help, growth, and enrichment. More and more people are beginning to recognize that as an Earth community, we are globally just as spiritually interdependent as we are ecologically, economically, politically, and financially interdependent. The modern interfaith movement, which is a global movement, presents a splendid opportunity to search for, find, and share the necessary spiritual resources, the ideas and visions to work for the good of the human community rather than its violation and destruction. Some of this finds expression in the many efforts of interfaith dialogue, but now also among people who are working in the fields of religions and ecology. And I come to my third section on religions and ecology now. As I've already mentioned, the different faiths possess considerable resources for contributing to environmental discussions and action. Yet there also exist creative tensions between the possibilities and limitations of religions with regard to environmental concerns. Many religions retain strong otherworldly orientations towards personal salvation outside this world. Yet at the same time, many religions have also fostered commitments to social justice, to peace, and to the ecological integrity in the world. Religions can encourage values of reverence, respect, and responsibility for formulating a broader environmental ethics that includes humans, ecosystems, and other species. This requires collaborative efforts among members of different faiths, but it also needs dialogue with other key areas of human endeavor, such as science, economics, and public policy. What is interesting is that over the last 2 decades, many scientists have acknowledged that religions have an important role to play in envisioning and working towards a sustainable future. And I could list here a whole set of statements that scientists have ratified since from 1990 onwards, an appeal for joint commitment in science and religion, World Scientists Warning Humanity, produced by the Union of Concerned Scientists, and so on and so forth. There's a whole lot. We have many, many statements which are very interesting to study. But does anything happen? This is the question, really. There was also the famous interreligious gatherings on the environment in Assisi under the sponsorship of the World Wildlife Fund in 1984, and then under the auspices of the Vatican in 1986. There are major statements made by participants of the regularly convened Parliament of World Religions from 1993 onwards, every 5 years. And they always issue statements concerning global ethics that embrace human rights as well as environmental issues. Then there exists a global forum of spiritual and parliamentary leaders, which has held several international meetings between 1988 to 1993 and has signed many statements in Moscow, in Rio de Janeiro, in Kyoto. And several of these have had the environment as a major focus. Since 1995, there exists also the Alliance of Religion and Conservation, ARC, which some of you will be familiar with, which has its headquarters, at least for England, in Bath, or between Bristol and Bath. And it has been very active not only in England, but also in Asia. That's the Alliance of Religion and Conservation, which works for environmental protection and restoration. Then there is a Coalition on Environment and Jewish Life, which has activated Jewish participation in environmental issues. During August 2000, more than 2,000 religious leaders met at the United Nations during the Millennium World Peace Summit of Religious and Spiritual Leaders, where the discussion of the environment was one of the 4 major themes. So that by now, the world religions have issued statements on the need to care for. Most of the leaders of different world faiths have issued such statements that we need to care for the earth, that we have to take responsibility for future generations. Several international religious leaders have become strong spokespersons on environmental issues, particularly the Dalai Lama, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, but also the former Anglican Archbishop Rowan Williams, and the Greek Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew, who has described the destruction of the environment as an ecological sin, which is a pretty strong statement. Ecology is also the promised theme of the Pope's next encyclical, at present eagerly awaited in the next few months by the world's Roman Catholics. So everybody feels we must do something about the environment, about ecological issues. Now, the American scholars Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm have been instrumental in setting up the International Forum on Religion and Ecology. Now, if we could perhaps have this, it's just for information if you're interested. It's a Forum on Religion Ecology, 4 for short, 4, and it has a website which I'll talk about in a minute. This forum arose out of a major conference series on religions of the world and ecology, which were held between 1996 and 1998 at the Center for the Study of World Religions at Harvard Divinity School. Over 800 scholars of world religions met with scientists, environmentalists, and grassroots leaders to examine the varied ways in which human-Earth relations have been conceived in the world religions. They came to the conclusion that no one religious tradition has a privileged ecological perspective, but that a diversity of perspectives is most helpful. Religious responses to environmental issues are essential and very necessary, but they are not sufficient on their own. Ecological challenges call for interdisciplinary cooperation between scientists, economists, educators, and religious people. Out of this series of conferences came a 10-volume series of books. So that's already almost 20, well, it's over 10 years, certainly 50, almost 20 years old. And these books examine the religions of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Shinto, and indigenous religions with regard to their ecological perspectives. They are really very, very important publications because they provide strong evidence that tremendous resources exist in each phase for developing more harmonious relations between humans, the Earth, and our cosmic environment. But for Tucker and Grimm, the religions have still not gone far enough. They ask the question, quite rightly, I quote, "If religions are willing to stand by and witness the withering of the Earth, has not something of their religious sensibilities become deadened or at best severely reduced? Why have religions been so late in responding to environmental issues? And what are the obstacles to their full participation?" Yet, whilst asking this, together with many others, they also realize that religions can make seminal contributions to the rethinking of the current environmental impasse. After religions having developed ethics for homicide, suicide, and genocide, religions are now challenged, they say, to respond with new thinking about biocide and ecocide, the killing of life and the killing of the environment. As religious people from different faiths are exploring questions of environmental ethics and collaborate in interreligious dialogue, a new alliance between religion and ecology is emerging around the planet. And that is exactly happening in this Forum of Religion and Ecology, which moved from Harvard to Yale. And it's at Yale University. The website there is the Yale Forum for Religion and Ecology, and you can look this up because they have a regular newsletter on news on religion and ecology.org. And you can find every month they have a new newsletter about the current developments and so on. So we must be aware that religions can have both a liberating and a limiting influence on ecological issues. No one religious tradition has a privileged ecological perspective. Multiple perspectives are needed, and these require interreligious collaboration. 4 different approaches can be discerned in dealing with religious responses to environmental problems. First, the ancient religious teachings we have in different scriptures can be reinterpreted to help us face the current crises. Second, their meaning may be extended to include non-human nature, not only humans, but also life that is non-human life. Third, creative thinkers may combine and synthesize elements of different traditions. And fourth, they may go further in proposing new ideas, practices, and organizations. So these approaches that have been summarized by people who work in this area reflect, I think, a new search to find new answers for a new human situation in a world that urgently requires a new human-Earth relationship. We can certainly, I give you these just as a few examples to show that we can certainly find many resources in the teachings of the world faith, so resources which can help us to develop an ecological spirituality and ethics, but none of the faith possesses as yet a fully developed, truly ecological spirituality. So what is needed is much more interfaith dialogue, much more critical sifting and radical revisioning, and a profound transformation of traditional worldviews. And that brings me to my last section, where I just share with you a few reflections on ecological spirituality, which is emerging. Many people in our society are aware of the contemporary burgeoning of interest in spirituality, both inside and outside religious institutions. But when you're aware of this, it can be a surprise to find out how unconnected most of this interest in spirituality remains to ideas about the world as a whole, the world of living, about living on the same earth, and of all of us belonging to the same web of life. Much spirituality is focused, much too individualistically focused. It is too past-oriented, too static, too focused on a person's inwardness, and not concerned with the world as a whole or with the human-earth relations. Such an approach does not understand spirituality ecologically, that is to say, as a dynamic process and a vivifying energy which is connected with all of life, not just with my inwardness or your inwardness or a little group. It's concerned with all of life and sees spirituality not as separated from other aspects of human experience. Much of traditional spirituality is still cast in a strongly patriarchal, hierarchical, and dualistic mode. Spirituality was in the past frequently a predominantly male domain, where the search for holiness was built on the contempt of the body and the world, and even more on the contempt of women. So today we realize more than ever before that our spirituality needs to be deeply grounded. It needs to be earthed, so to speak. Just as we earth electricity, we have to earth the power of spirit. We have to relate it to our bodies, to our environment, to our earth. We have to live spirituality through our whole body, being rooted in the earth and in the whole universe. There appears no common doctrine which provides a core to the various attempts to formulate a truly ecological spirituality, apart from a general understanding of the universe as a self-regulating organism and a strong emphasis on respect and care, on the reverence of life as sacred, and the need for earth healing that some people speak about. The earth healing that is needed to redeem and reverse our destruction and domination of the earth. In many archaic, primal, and indigenous religions, the earth has long been worshipped as the mother of all life. the mother to which all human beings bear a most intimate and inalienable relationship that each human being has to honor and continue. An example of this veneration of the earth is found, for example, in a statement from the Navajo nation in North America. And this statement runs like this: "This earth you stand on is your mother, whether you are red, white, black, brown, yellow, or blue. We must unite and help one another save our precious mother, for without Mother Earth to take care and protect us, we are a dead race." Now that's a pretty powerful statement. While reflections on ecology have a deep impact on all forms of contemporary spirituality, they also bring about the revival of ancient religious beliefs and practices and the growth of new religious movements. It's called a new eco-theology and eco-spirituality have developed, which are closely related to our understanding of the earth in the light of contemporary ecological concerns. There's even a journal on eco-theology. Another attempt is ecofeminism, where a deep ecological spirituality is combined with concerns of the women's movement. So the concerns of the women's movement come together with concerns of the ecological movement. Ecological issues were also central to the agenda of the World Council of Churches' long-standing consultation on justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. Then there is the Green Spirit movement, which I think is also up there, the website is up there, which provides events, journals, publications, and it describes itself on its website, I quote, as a search for an authentic spirituality for our time, asking deep questions about the human spirit and its true relationship with the earth. So in Thomas Berry's view, the renewal of religion in the future will depend on our appreciation of the natural world as a locus for the meeting of the divine and the human. He says the universe itself is the primary divine revelation. The splendor and the beauty of the natural world in all its variety must be preserved if any worthy idea of the divine is to survive in the human community. So we need to renew the earth as a bio-spiritual planet. The human community needs to draw creatively on all available spiritual disciplines and use all educational resources and energies and cross the traditional boundaries between different religions, spiritualities, and cultures to develop such a new kind of spirituality that is deeply rooted in the earth. Thinking of spirituality ecologically also means that spirituality is understood in an evolutionary sense. Spirituality itself develops and unfolds so as to articulate the human condition in a way that is commensurate with a particular time and age. Contrary to an earlier instrumental attitude that explored and exploited nature, the ecological attitude approaches the natural world as our home, as a sanctuary which needs to be treated with responsibility, care, and reverence. As the preamble of the Earth Charter so beautifully states, the protection of Earth's vitality, diversity, and beauty is a sacred trust. Now, as I already indicated during my talk, over the last 20 years, many, many splendid declarations have been developed regarding ecological issues. They have been developed not only by politicians and environmentalists, but by religious thinkers, religious leaders, and religious organizations. But if we are to save the earth and ourselves, what we need more than anything else is not declarations, but it's action. Religious ideals need to be translated into social and political action. If we truly care for the future of people and planet, we must act now in a truly ecological spirit. So the convergent encounter and dialogue between people of different faiths in East and West is essential today for the development of a spiritual ecology, since the world's religious and philosophical traditions possess such irreplaceable spiritual energy resources that can make some of the most valuable contributions to the future of humanity and the planet. Reflecting on the greening of religions in 2007, Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm came to the conclusion that religions are starting to find their voices regarding the environment. They wrote, "The monotheistic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are formulating original eco-theologies and eco-justice practices regarding stewardship and care for creation. Hinduism and Jainism in South Asia and Buddhism in both Asia and the West have undertaken projects of ecological restoration. Indigenous peoples bring to the discussion alternative ways of knowing and engaging in the natural world. All of those religious traditions are moving forward to find the language, symbols, rituals, and ethics for encouraging protection of bioregions and species." End of quotation. And I shall finish with this because I think it summarizes that this religion and ecology joint venture is truly a new moment for the world religions, since they have a vital role to play in developing a more comprehensive global ethic and ecological spirituality among their followers. The flourishing of people and the planet, of the entire Earth community, may well depend on the practical and spiritual efforts of moving the whole of life to a new stage. Thank you.